I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today, we talk about youth sports and healthy communities. At the core of health improvement in the communities is the well-being of youth and the need for children and families to learn how to work together. We look at kids and what really winning is about, and joining us is youth coach, community health improvement champion, and above all, parent and mother, Laurel Muting. Laurel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me on today. So I am a parent to two amazing girls. One is 17 and the youngest is 14. I've been married to my wonderful husband, Jason, for nearly 23 years. So wife and mother, number one, and then came along softball coach. So I've been I was an athlete growing up, played multiple sports throughout high school, had the ability or the opportunity really to play collegiate softball. And then when my girls got old enough to start playing, throwing a ball around at the age of 4, I became a coach. So I've coached for the past 13 years. The last 7 of those 13 years have been, I've coached at a select or a club level. Fairly competitive level. And so that's a little bit about me.
Now, when you talk about coaching, I know you're a champion of community health improvement stuff and healthy lifestyles and kids and families. But from talking to you, I've sort of gotten to know that there's a grounding in youth sports and team-oriented sports that you feel is pretty important for kids growing up these days. Talk about that and how you look at that, not just for your own kids, but for other kids in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I was an athlete growing up. That's just plain and simple who I was. And it taught me a lot about life. It taught me grit. It taught me determination. It taught me how to be a good teammate. When I was in high school, I didn't sit on the bench. And when I went to college, I did. And I didn't know how to do that well. And so that's kind of been one of my missions as a coach, is to help kids understand their role. And that translates to life. That's not just about a softball team or a basketball team or whatever. That's about life. We all have different roles every day in life, in our jobs, in our marriages, in our families, and in our communities. And they don't have to stay the same. Those roles can change based on how hard you work, right? If you want something different and what you put in to get a different role. And so that's been something that I think, for my kids, athletics has been, and they're not done yet, but, it has been something that has been a really huge component of their lives.
Now, let's talk about something that fascinates me, because you talked about being an athlete and having to sit on the bench. And all of us through the aging process see that role happen. We get older. We're not going to be the best at all of our athletic endeavors. We have to learn to change our standards. But the idea of going from being a starter to being on the bench, wow, that's sort of I just realized that you said that. That's sort of what a parent goes through when they put their kid in a team and there's a coach, that all of a sudden the parent is on the bench. They're not out there doing the kids' coaching. That's got to be a big transition for parents.
And I think for some parents it is, especially parents who have a background in, in that sport, which a lot of parents do, right? And so it is hard. And even though I am a coach, I have done that. I have been a parent too, and not a coach, because it's awful hard to coach both kids at a high level to be their head coach. And so it is hard. So I understand and appreciate that feeling. But I think too, more for most parents, the backseat is that when you put your kid on a team, especially a select level team or a competitive team, it's not about you anymore. It's not about the athlete that you were. It's not about the player that you were. It's about your kid. And that's what it should be about. But I think sometimes parents get, they're conflicted and maybe don't see exactly where their kid is or isn't. And I've actually had it both ways. I've had parents feel like their kid should be playing more. When I'm like, you might have been a really great athlete. Your kid's just not there yet. And she's not the best one for this position. And so as the coach, I'm not going to play her there because that's not her position. That's what I say to parents, help support me and trust me enough to know that I'm going to find a place for your kid to be successful. Okay, you might think she has the potential to be a really good pitcher right now. That's not the case. Okay, so we're not doing that. If she wants to work outside of practice, then she can get better and whatever. But that's not the position for her. But I've also had parents who feel like, oh, you know what? This is a little bit too competitive. I don't think that my kid can do this level. And that's, and I'll say that's where you're wrong. Your kid is ready to compete at this high level, but you have to trust me to allow them to do that.
Wow, that's really fun. It's interesting to get your input on that. We're going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to continue our conversation with Laurel and learn a little bit of what it's like to be a parent, a coach, and even a kid. See y'all after the break.
Malware and bots and worms, oh my. The wild, wild web can be a scary and complex place. And as our digital world expands, so too are the threats. Watch out, Trojan horse. That's why at Mediacom, we take security very seriously and monitor our networks around the clock to stop threats before they can affect you. Not today, rude kid. Not all internet is created equal. We build ours to keep you connected and protected.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Or maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Laurel Muting about the value of team sports and the importance of a parent's role in youth activities. You know, Laurel, I remember sitting in the stands when my boys were playing football, especially. That was the biggest one. And there were more than a handful of former athletes, some professional athletes that would sit there. And we literally, we would physically respond to the hits the kids take. You would tense up. Or you would feel the emotional letdown if they dropped the ball or, gosh, anything. And so it really is an emotional journey. So that's tough for parents to deal with, because then you don't want to go home and be the critic of your kid. You want to be supportive, but your brain is playing both sides of this. But here, and then the fascinating thing is, when we were talking about, is you're actually a mom and a coach at the same time. What is that like?
Sometimes it's really, really tough. I have always been one that I did not want people to ever think that my kids were playing because they were my kids. I wanted them to be playing and people to know they were playing because they deserve to play. And so for that reason, I'm probably harder on my kids than anybody ever will be, because I wanted them to play because they deserve it. So that part is kind of hard. And my personality, yeah, we did great. Yeah, we won. Guess what? There are some things we could do better. And here's what it is. So that's just my personality. I'm always looking to be better, to do better. And so I had to learn with my kids that wasn't when they get in the car, that's not the first thing that we talk about. We have to talk about something different than we should have done this, or we could have done this, or if we'd have got that out, then we wouldn't have been in this situation, things like that. So we do talk about that, and they're probably, if they watch this, they're going to be like, yeah, Mom, that's not true. But that's as a coach, I'm always analyzing our performance, even if we won. What could we do different? What could we work on at practice? What drills can we design to get better? Because that's just who I am as a person.
Now, I want to ask you if your kids ever call you out on that, being tougher on them, but I sort of know the answer. All kids do. But the other part of it is that you've also got to see the role of youth sports and team building in building healthy communities. And actually, I mean, we talked about parents having to relinquish some responsibility, but in the long term, doesn't it help build stronger families to develop these skills in kids?
Absolutely. And it helps build leadership skills in these kids. I mean, this for me is not about wins and losses. It's about teaching these girls how to bounce back after a tough loss, how to bounce back after an injury. The team that I currently coach, we've had a lot of girls with injuries, and it is, we're going to have injuries in life. You're going to have setbacks in life. And so it, for me, is about building these beautiful, from the inside out, resilient women who are going to grow up and, know how to handle the tough things that life throws at them, because it's life isn't always a win. It isn't. There's lots of things that are going to be thrown at us, and we have to figure out how to handle those. And so that's really what this is about, is growing fierce, competitive, driven, determined women who are going to grow up to be leaders in their own communities and their own families.
Now, in an age where it's been said that with social media and everything, this is one of the loneliest periods for kids to grow up in. Does team sport also build, can you see the kids sort of becoming friends and getting in, being able to share things in an intimate way that make them feel more comfortable about dealing with things growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the culture that we strive for, that I strive for on the teams that I create, is that we don't play for one person. We don't play for ourselves. We play for each other. And that's really the culture that we cultivate, that I really want to cultivate in the teams that I coach. And that's hard to do with social media. For club sports and softball, right now, Twitter is huge, and it's, hey, here's some of my highlights from the weekend. I did this in the circle. I did this at the plate. Teams will tweet out, so many strikeouts, so many hits per person. And I don't do that, because we win as a team and we lose as a team. There's not just one person on this team that makes the win happen. You have to have a pitcher, you have to have a catcher, you have to have people making plays in the outfield. And so for me, I really communicate, and everything that I do revolves around the team. If we have a win, it's a team win all the way around. Yeah, our pitcher might have done great. She might have struck out, 5 people, but it's not about that. It's about the whole team, the team as a whole. And so I think that's really hard for kids to understand, especially when they're going on Twitter and seeing all these things. Well, all these other people are, posting all these huge things that they did. But again, that's not what our team is about.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an infatuation with only talking about the good and even exaggerating it sometimes. And they really talk about that having a negative effect on kids. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back to continue our conversation and a little bit about the do's and don'ts in sports for parents and children. See you all after the break.
You told me not to cross the street without looking both ways.
You told me not to touch the stove.
You told me not to do drugs.
You told me not to drink and drive.
You gave me so many messages about how to stay safe. Why didn't you keep me safe by properly storing your gun?
You won't read about my mom in the history books, but she's gonna change history forever. You'll never learn about her in school, but she'll redefine everything we know. She's not a scientist or a doctor, but she's gonna help save a lot of lives. My mom works at Mediacom, and they're going to bring us one of the world's first 10G broadband platforms. Mom says, dream big.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and our guest, Laurel, has worked with parents, families, and communities to make them safe and healthy for our kids. But team building and sports are really important to her, and maybe more important to our communities than we know. Laurel, one of the things that we talked about was parents, and we sort of put them in a tough spot, relinquish their duties, stand back, watch, but actually they can be a big partner in their children's success as well. I mean, and I would venture to say that the majority of parents are pretty good about knowing their space. It's usually just a minority of ones that don't know the lines between coaching and being a parent that give us a problem. But on the good side of the parental equation, and for the kids, because they may not see things the same way, what are some of the do's and don'ts for parents to understand when they put their kid in a team, and maybe what kids have to remember to share with their parents so they don't feel like there's a barrier between the coach and them?
Yeah, sure. And I think, the first thing is knowing where your kid is at and what they want. As when kids are littler, like 8, 9, 10, I mean, we have this label of select or club softball. And really at that age, everyone is kind of the same. And so, I mean, it's select because parents have the money to put their kid on the team, right? And so I think as kids get older, I think for parents, it's really important, and it's not easy, but it's understanding where your kid is at on the spectrum. I mean, everyone is a huge fan of their own kid, we would hope, right? But being realistic about your child's ability and where they're at is important, because trying to put someone on a top level, highly competitive team at the A level that's really a C level player is not going to be a good situation for anyone. It's probably not going to be super great for the kid. It's probably not going to be super great for the parent unless you understand where your child is at comparison to everyone else. And it's not going to make it easy for the coach either. And so I think it's important to be realistic about your kid's ability and where they're at. Number two, I think it's important to understand I only have these kids for 4.5 hours, maybe tops, a week. You see them all the time. And so if you want your kid to grow, get better, have better skills, you have to do something about that. It's not just my job. And so where do kids get better? A lot of times people say they feel like they need game reps. If they're not playing in a game, they're not getting better. I would disagree, because if you're on the right team with the right coach and the right practice plan, the first place kids get better is at home, outside of practice, hitting lessons, pitching lessons, catching lessons, fielding lessons. If you don't know how to do that, you can find someone that's qualified to help your kid. They can put in the work outside of practice, and they should be. That's the first place they grow and develop. The second place they grow and develop is practice. So if you have a coach that runs a well-organized, very energetic and high level practice, they're going to get better at practice than they are in games, because what happens at practice is harder than a game. That's how I design my practices, because I want my kids to not have to think about things when they get in the game. They've done everything and they've done it hard. They've done the hard things in practice, so that when they get in a game, they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to be anxious about it. They know that there's nothing they're going to have happen to them in a game than we've already done at practice. And so those are the things that parents should be looking for, not only in a coach, but in practices. Those are questions that you should ask, as you're putting your kids on these teams.
It's a fascinating science when you think about kids and raising them and what you do. But there's funny lessons here. Oh, they're not funny, they're serious. In all our lives as adults, we go through these sortings. You go into school, you play sports. You have to decide, are you going to try D1, D2, D3, or are you going to study academics because that's not going to be your direction? We're always facing failure. And we've all heard, in baseball, you get in the Hall of Fame batting 300. That's 3 out of 10. That means 7 out of 10 times that batter failed at the plate. So the lessons of success and failure are so important with kids, and maybe even more so with parents that want to keep dreaming of all the good old days, not remembering all the lessons they learned getting through things. How is it dealing with the emotional state of kids now, where we see all this social media pushing them to always be winners or look beautiful or adjust everything, to actually deal with the raw emotion of winning and losing?
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that's very different between parents and kids. Parents look at success and they define it as winning, wins and losses. And kids don't look at it that way. And I certainly don't look at it that way either. If my season, if I'm about 500 in my season, then that means I was playing the right kind of competition. If I've only lost 3 games, that means I wasn't playing hard enough competition. Okay, because that's the way that people get better and they grow. And the goal with all of my teams is that we grow these kids into fierce competitive women, but also athletes that want to compete, because we've got to know how to compete in life. And so, yeah, that's really important. And maybe we can circle back around to that.
Yeah, we need to take a short break so you can come back and share some final comments, insights, inspiration. It's so important for us to hear that from you. But also, I love the idea of developing these fierce, successful women. That sort of embodiment of their values and their growth is so important. Let's take a short break. We'll see y'all. You don't want to miss this.
Watching MC22 is now easier than ever before. All Mediacom customers can watch local programming online anytime. Go to mc22.net, click Watch MC22, and log in with your Mediacom account. Not a Mediacom cable subscriber? Mediacom internet or phone subscribers can watch too. Your local programming leader, MC22, online at mc22.net/watch.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about youth sports, healthy communities, and the need for children and families to learn how to work together. Let's see what insights and inspiration our guest, Laurel, has to share with us. Laurel, the podium is yours.
All right. Well, I think another really important thing to have conversations with in your families is what is the definition of success, right? And so I think for a lot of parents, they look at a win and loss record. But that's not necessarily what your team or what your child is looking at as a definition of success. And I think that's what is so important, is that we're not defined by wins and losses. And I think the reason that my teams have been so successful in the past is because we define our own success, right? And so when I go around and I ask my kids, how do you define success? What does success look like for you, for our team? I've went around 2 times. So every kid gave 2 answers, and not one time did any of them say win. And that's what I said to them when they were done. I said, do you guys realize that not one of you said winning is how we define success? And that to me is super cool, because the answers that I got were things like improving from where you started, working hard while competing to get an outcome that you want, communication. We're going to need communication for the rest of our life. That was how we defined success. Growth, competing, being a team player, productive at bats, moving runners. How often do as a parent, you feel bad that your kid struck out? But guess what? Maybe that kid saw 6, 7, 8 pitches and moved runners from first to third with pass balls and at their at bat. That's still a productive at bat. Knowing your role on the team. If it's time for you to lay down a sacrifice bunt, that's what it's time for you to do. It's not about hitting a home run. It's about sacrificing for your team. Other things, competing until the game is over, not giving up, grit, determination, staying mentally strong. How about this one? Owning up to mistakes, fixing mistakes. As a pitcher, getting batters to ground out or to fly out, not necessarily striking everyone out, because that's not how life works, right? And so I think it's really important as parents to talk to your kids. How are your coaches? How is your team going to define success besides just a win and loss record?
You know, there's something else that's resonated really strongly with me listening to this. because we are hearing so much about the mental health issues of young men and young women growing up and understanding those skills like you've just pointed out that the team players see. Do you see an important and evolving increased importance in the role of team sports for young women to be able to empower themselves to succeed in this world?
Absolutely. And I think being on the right team is really important for that, because most of this game is mental. And those are things that we work on. We work on mental skills. We work on knowing your role. We work on at the plate. What pitch are you looking for? It's not always about you being a hero. It's about knowing what you're looking for so you can get a base hit, so you can advance a runner, so you can put a bunt down. And there's so, I just struck out. Now I have to go back out and pitch. How can I handle that mentally? And so all of those mental skills are things that we work on. And so that's another thing that our parents should be investing in is mental skills, either with your coach, or there are lots of fabulous resources out there for mental skills for our young women. And that then in turn leads to better mental health outcomes for our kids, right? It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to be in a slump. Softball isn't you. It doesn't define you. It's not who you are as a person. It's part of who you are, but there are so many other things to each of these individual amazing women, their sisters, their daughters, their students, their musicians. And it's about finding that balance, because softball can't be your life forever.
That's a really, really great point. And so the value of the kids' efforts, and then the parents being there to cheerlead, to be there non-judgmentally support them, that's got to be a big factor in games as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And support what the coach is doing. I mean, I think, it's important for parents to be involved and invested, but also supportive, because if they're not supportive, that's going to transfer to that kid, right? And so then that translates back on the team, right? And that's counterproductive for everything that we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I'm proud of what you've shared with us today. I mean, it just, parents need to see this, kids need to know we all care, and God bless the great work of the girls in your program. And thank you all for watching us today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org, and keep an eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.